Everybody. Super excited today to have Clément Sténac with us. He is the CTO and co-founder of Dataiku. Thank you for joining us, Clément. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for inviting me, and very nice being here.
Awesome. So Dataiku has become a force. Like we've seen it graduate and become like this place, hold a place in the market. And we have such a broad audience. I like to, before I dive into the tech, I like to make sure that people understand the problems being solved. So describe what the world in corporations and organizations, what their world is like when they don't have Dataiku. What is it? What's the pain that they experience that Dataiku really solves?
So what we believe is that every organization in the world has data problems and needs to use data to thrive. And that's what we call everyday AI, meaning that we believe that AI and benefiting from data is not just for a small minority of very technical companies or very large companies or companies only in some sectors. It's really something that has to become pervasive. And so companies of all size and all industries struggle with a lot of things. They struggle with the difficulty to find talent. They struggle with the disconnect between data scientists, business analysts, data engineers, IT. They struggle a lot with the lack of collaboration between all of these. And then they struggle a lot with the difficulty of putting together a lot of point solutions that need a lot of plumbing, a lot of maintenance, meaning that in the end, only very large, very complex organizations, if they don't have good data science tools, benefit from data. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're here to solve.
Gotcha. Yeah, in the pain there is that you just getting people to work from a single place where their skill sets can be centralized and whatnot. Does Dataiku help with that, where it's they can kind of work from the same workbench?
Exactly. So that's where Dataiku, we believe, is very different from other solutions, is that it's a single unified solution that caters both to all profiles. We have users who are both business users, business analysts, data analysts, people who are more on the data management, data engineering part, data engineers, ML engineers, and people who are really in the data science building models part, and all of that being governed, being accessible, being also available for consumers who are here to benefit from the data and not just to build data products. And all of them can work on a single end-to-end and collaborative workbench.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is the capabilities that, and you can see it just when, and this is years ago. I mean, when I first got exposed to it, you were seeing capabilities within a workbench that usually had to be dispersed to people that were, in the corner coding stuff, but it was all kind of centralized in that workbench. And I thought that was really powerful, especially in that you could integrate that process along with the process of the traditional data flow or data integration pipelines, which I thought was awesome.
So that's very nice to hear that you had this wow effect and this really understanding of everything fits together and is connected together. That's really the kind of thing we want to make available to everybody. So we're happy that you.
So the world without it, it's really just project teams working independently, doing their own stuff, not really working together, right?
Exactly. And working on different tools, having difficulties communicating, having difficulties also keeping the knowledge. What we have seen a lot is that having these disparate tools and having notably data scientists, if they work in isolation on their notebooks, etc., they are very productive tools and they are very useful tools. But in the end, all of the work needs to be centralized, needs to be governed so that it doesn't stop at the experimentation, but it goes to production and it stays even if some people leave. We've seen that a lot of customers expressing that pain. Data scientists are a scarce resource. They are a very sought after resource. So they tend to move. And we've heard many times the story of customers who basically had to redo a lot of stuff because some of their data scientists had left, and the knowledge, the data, the processes had not been properly centralized and governed.
Okay. So does it actually generate the code, or does it allow the data scientists to sort of have a location where they enter that code?
So really, it's both. Dataiku caters both to coder and non-coder audience in a very tightly knit fashion, meaning that you have this unified data flow where you have both visual parts and coding parts. And really, the idea is that if you want to code, you have the full flexibility for doing so. It's not a specialized or restricted coding environment. It's just your all regular Python or R. And you can use all of the packages you are used to. There are no restrictions on that. However, what we've seen is that data scientists do not like, and data scientists, again, are a scarce resource. Coder data scientists are a scarce resource. And so they want, and companies want them to focus on highly productive tasks and highly specialized tasks that cannot be done with visual tools, or maybe that cannot be done by others. By having this tightly knit thing, we see two things. Both other profiles can contribute, whereas, again, what we've heard, what we've seen a lot, is companies telling us, each time we want a new data extract or a new data preparation, we have to write up what we want. We have to take that specification to a data scientist who is going to code it. It's going to take time. And to be honest, it's going to take precious time from the data scientist, whereas he could focus on more added value things. Having all of that tightly knit together in the UI allows the business analyst to create his own data preparation, his own data extraction, his own data story without having to go to code. And the data scientist can focus on this higher value thing and can make that available back to non-coders. So it's really this virtuous cycle that goes back and forth between coding and non-coding.
Got it. So and it sounds also like you said, if a developer leaves, that person's code is understood within the workflow of a larger body of work. So it's not just this thing that's in the corner. It's actually part of a workflow.
Exactly. It's always part of the workflow. You always have the full traceability, the full versioning, the full lineage of what has been done, why it has been done. And yes, we believe that's one of the critical aspects for data projects to succeed.
Awesome. So
the evolution of how data science has evolved. So, traditionally we had statisticians, and statisticians would focus on doing that work that is statistical work. It's mathematics, it's doing statistics. And so it was common in pharmaceutical and many other industries that where you need to calculate some mean time between failure or drug efficacy or half-life of drugs. All of those things were part of the process. And the tooling that was used was incredibly mature. The tooling was, big, expensive licenses of technologies that today are still in some places being used. And so when the revolution of data science and the term data science comes about, you now have Python, you've got R, but the tooling doesn't exist. What exists are the independent things that you could write, but they don't have a home. They don't have a workbench. They don't have a place where all of these things can come together. And it wasn't, for me personally, until Dataiku's vision was described. We just talked about it before this, going back to 2015.
Yes.
It's the idea of sharing this knowledge and being able to have different participants on a data science project participate, whether it be business, whether it be data ops, whether it be data engineering, whether it be a scientist, a mathematician. I think the thing that Dataiku is changing is really providing that workbench, providing that place to collaborate.
Yeah.
So happy to hear that how much of our vision you share. That's indeed one of the big conceptual part of the vision that we've had from the start, actually. So we are happy to hear that.
So tell us about that startup story. I love startup stories. It's one of my favorite things to hear about. So tell us a little bit about the Dataiku startup story. Did it start in a garage? Like where, how did you get involved and just walk us through that?
So it did not start in a garage. It started in an incubator in Paris.
Okay.
Very nice incubator in Paris called Agora Nova.
Okay.
It started a lot from a common sense of this pain. So we were 4 founders initially, and all 4 founders had, to an extent or the other, at some point in their career, experienced that pain of it's so annoying, it's so complicated, it's so boring to work with data. So, for example, Florian was working at a digital marketing startup and had to write data pipelines all by himself in Python. He actually started to create a small tool to do it. But in the end, it was really that it's not possible. We can't have every company having to reinvent how to do data analysis. So it's important to understand it was in 2012. So at that time, Pandas, for example, was still nascent. So it was a different world, but this world of there are tools that exist. Notably, there are open source tools that exist. There is a vast corpus of things that can be leveraged, but it's so complicated. You have to put everything together. You have to do a lot of plumbing. That it's complicated. And so we really started with this vision of we want to put all of the capabilities, all of the tools together in a form that allows companies, whatever their size, whatever their industry, to leverage that and to make their data scientists more productive. So that's interesting. Really, our first focus was making data scientists more productive. And it also started with this very concept of they are scarce, their time is precious. If we can speed up their work, the gain is very high.
Interesting.
So that's how it started.
Did was there a pitch that was made to the incubator org, or tell us about that process?
So indeed, so the pitch was basically what I said.
Yep.
There's a pain and there's the solution. And yes, there was a selection process.
Okay.
So it's interesting because it was the French tech scene nowadays is extremely active, really buzzing, etc. It was more nascent back in 2012. And it's really very nice to see how much Paris has evolved as a big tech hub in Europe since then.
So how did the founders find each other?
More like I knew Florian, who knew Thomas, we knew Mark. So it was there was a graph of
I've got something for you. Get over here.
Exactly. So the initial idea and thinking was from Florian, and we each added small bricks to the thing. And we at some point we thought, there's something to do. Let's do it.
Yeah. And did you form the team before you went to go to the incubator, or was the incubator there and then we brought the team in?
We formed the team first.
Okay.
Yeah, we formed the team first. First we formed the team, then we went to the incubator, and then we actually incorporated the company.
Yeah, 2015 is when I first really found Dataiku. But reality is, if you think about the timing of this, you've got Spark in Berkeley being developed that turns into Databricks. You've got Snowflake, and also developers who do speak pretty decent French, who are focusing on the company and building it. Dataiku is building it. There must have been something from a global data perspective that the mid 2015s into 2020s that were important.
What I think it was is that you had Hadoop kind of come in and putter out. It was just kind of falling apart. People were really struggling with those projects.
And actually we started before Spark existed, and so one of our first big things and big strengths was that we incorporated Hadoop natively, and we made Hadoop realistic for many. And some of our first customers were really okay. We've just bought Cloudera or Hortonworks, or even at that time we've just compiled open source Hadoop, but there's no way we are going to actually write MapReduce in Java. So there was Pig, there was Hive.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was all command line, very complicated, erroring out all the time. So really, some of the first features we did was put a UI, put something that makes it more smooth, that handles errors, that shows you what to do, and that provides this lineage and this ability to not just run one query, but run an entire data flow. So indeed, there was the need for Hadoop to exist and to pave the way for Spark, Snowflake, etc. To then, okay, that's the next phase. And indeed, we arrived at when we started. Hadoop was actually already 5 years old. Hadoop is from 2008, I think.
Yeah.
But it was still nascent in the enterprise space. And there was several more years of growth before it somehow indeed reached a plateau. And we definitely now see the transition towards both the cloud and more modern data warehouse slash data lake.
And also, since we're touching history a little bit in our world, this is ancient history. When you talk about anything before 2020, it's already really old. But pandas and Python and the whole Python ecosystem obviously is another big contributing factor in the rebirth of and the approach that we take to data science. I think Wes McKinney and the pandas library were big instrumental things that sort of pushed the envelope in terms of what was possible Python R. And of course, today there are other things that are going on with Arrow and other projects.
Yes, everywhere.
So Clément, when you started, were there some moments where, I know, because you put a lot on the line when you're doing a startup, right? You got a lot invested, and I don't think a lot of people recognize the amount that people put into a startup. I mean, they hear about startups and they become successful, but you're risking a lot, and you're risking your time and your money and whatnot. Were there moments where it was like, this is going to make it and it's going to be huge? Like, are there moments that happened where it's like, yes, we have something good?
Definitely, and actually, the first of these moments did come quite early. So I think it was a blessing, because indeed it takes time, it takes money, but it takes energy to really. But so we actually started doing a lot of modules together. Dataiku is all about being end to end, so we started on several things at the same time. Which was a bit interesting, because at that time, one of the big dogmas, I would say, or doxa, was you need to do just one thing, and you need to be the best at it. You need to be laser focused, etc. But we're French, so we are always a bit. No, we are going rather to do a bit of everything. But one of the very first things we did is our visual interactive data preparation tool, where you just drag and drop and click to fix data, etc. And that did create wow effect really almost instantly, because again, people were comparing to, okay, how do I do that now? So either data is very small, I can do it in Excel, which is still good,
right?
But people who had significant amounts of data, they basically only had, okay, I need to write Python and I need to iterate, etc. And we often say, data preparation is 80% of the time, etc. And unfortunately, sometimes it was really even more than 80%. So seeing just data being prepared, being transformed literally in a few minutes, people immediately started thinking about, oh, this can be game changing. So yes, that's good. That was really nice. And similarly, when we started showing the flow with automatic data lineage, automatic rebuild, that started pinging, but with different profiles. People who are more in operationalization, who were more in okay, I manage my Hive pipelines with Uzi. It breaks all the time. I don't know what's happening, etc. And here suddenly you had visibility and transparency into your data flows. So yes, we had this very early, there can be something moment. And then there was when we understood that it could be bigger than we thought. So there was this, okay, it can work, and then, okay, it can be big. And these are two different moments.
Yeah.
In a way, when we started Dataiku, we were thinking, okay, we would target mostly online companies, retailers, etc. And it could be so cool if there was 10, 20 people in these companies using Dataiku. And then we started having prospects interested in actually a very inbound prospects about, okay, I'm in a pharma, I'm in finance, etc. And okay, I start with 5 users, 10, 20, 50, 100. And that's when we really understood. I think during the first years, we were really focused on this. We are here to help data scientists. And we uncovered that, well, of course, data scientists matter a lot, but the big thing is enabling everybody, enabling all what we call AI makers to do much more and to be much less restricted. And yes, that's when we understood that we should not aim for 20 people in a customer, but 2,000.
Yeah. What did it the duration to get there, was it fast, like where the adoption was quick and you knew it would be big?
So these customers who really started pushing from this initial kind of envelope to really big, large enterprise, we started having this discussion about 2 years after we created Dataiku, a bit more than 2 years. And you mentioned, Arkady, 2015. And indeed, this is really the time when we started to understand how to talk to the US market. And we started to understand that indeed people and companies with larger population of data analysts were very interested in what we were doing. And then this ramp up within these customers was, I'm not going to say it was instant, but it was definitely faster than we had envisioned, sometimes in a matter of 6-9 months, going from initial discovery to, okay, that's the platform that we want, and we are going to massify it within our company.
Wow, that is cool.
I think the other big decision that you made is there's a big drive for SaaS. So you are the host, you're hosting the platform. And I think you had and maybe talk a little bit about that, the idea that the customer owns the data. And so you provided them the ability to run in the cloud, to run on-prem, but talk a little bit about the decision about letting the tool be within the control of the customer rather than you being the host and you providing the compute and those kinds of things.
So indeed, the SaaS versus not SaaS discussion was one that arrived almost from the start. To an extent, it was driven by what the environment was at that time. In 2013, AWS was already established. Azure and GCP were more nascent, and large enterprises, especially in more risk-adverse, I would say, sectors like finance, were still viewing the cloud as, that's probably not for us. So we wanted to make sure that we could put a tool that could be used by everybody. And so something that's interesting is that we see some companies in data or in other sectors start with a SaaS and then work on making their SaaS on-premise fiable. but we believe that it's a more complicated thing. To some extent, new capabilities like Kubernetes make that easier. But again, at that time, it did not really exist. So we really did make the opposite choice of making our tool first something that is software, plain old software that is in the control of the user, completely cloud native. We did start with the cloud, and the tool from the very beginning was completely integrated in the cloud ecosystem. So it always could run either under customer control in their premise or under customer control on public clouds, deeply integrated with the public cloud offerings. And then transitioning or more adding options to actually host ourselves. So Dataiku now also provides a SaaS option called Dataiku Online. And really now it's a matter of choice for customer. We still have a significant part of our customer who are still using on-prem. Most of the vast majority, of course, of new deployments are either on public clouds or using Dataiku Online, so as a software as a service. But we still have a large minority of on-prem, and we believe that there will always be a significant minority of that. Public cloud has progressed in an incredible manner, especially since 2017, I would say. But yes, having a tool that everybody can use was one of our big goals from the start.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Jared and I have talked about this quite a bit. It used to be, especially for regulated industries like financial services and those that are in the HIPAA and healthcare sectors, exactly. It was no cloud. That was the mantra. And now it's the conversation has shifted cloud. To cloud first rather than no cloud.
So it's incredible how the conversation has shifted, indeed.
Yeah.
We still see, at least at some of our customers, that there is a lag between what they say and where they're still at. We do have some customers asking us about cloud, you need to be cloud first, etc. Mm-hmm. We are going to move everything to the cloud, but it's still, we are going to move everything to the cloud. But indeed, I fully agree that the conversation has completely shifted, and you mentioned Snowflake earlier. They are definitely one of the best examples of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, just speaking on the same vein of big changes or big features that you were adding as you went along, I mean, you're covering a lot of technologies, right? It's a lot of coding languages in a lot of ways, right? So what are some of the big features as you've, gone from where you started to where you are now? What are some of the really big features that have set you apart and that are, important to the brand?
To a large extent, I would say the features have been here, I would not say from the start, but yes, some of the big differentiating factors, which is having both this visual data preparation, interactive data preparation, the flow, the full lineage, the rebuild capabilities, the ability to create web apps, either coding or non-coding, the ability, of course, the full visual AutoML. All of this was here from the start. And what has changed a lot is indeed how much we go deep on much of these aspects. We started with very simple AutoML, and we now have a very, very, very deep, very complex AutoML that caters to a very large number of use cases, that integrates a large amount of algorithms, etc. So yes, we really went wide and then went deep to some extent. And we are a bit in a new phase where we are now going wide again. We recently added a lot of new capabilities in terms of governance of data. We think it's one of the next frontiers, both of what Dataiku can do, but also what the companies need as they scale, as they increase from 1 to 5 to 100 to 1,000 data projects. Governing these data projects, having a bird's eye view of all of them, being able to evaluate risk and value of them, making sure, especially for regulated industries, that all necessary checkpoints have been met before deploying them in production is going to be one of the main needs for customers, and especially for large enterprise in the coming years. So we're making big pushes on that.
Interesting. So One thing that I've wanted to ask you about is the adjacency to what we would look at as ETL, right? So ETL, traditional ETL is just very workflow oriented type stuff. And it seems like Dataiku created this way to be able to think about data science projects within the framework of a workflow. And I'm wondering, like, what's the boundary between Dataiku and ETL? Like, is there a boundary there? Is that boundary gone? And can Dataiku just do the whole ETL workflow, or do you see them coexisting in accounts? Like, talk about that for just a minute.
So if we look at the projects that our customers handle, I would say that a very significant portion of the projects that our customers do are not data science. They are indeed using data, leveraging data, getting value from data. But at the end of the day, so many projects that get value from data are indeed just transforming data, putting data together, aggregating, creating reports, creating stories, feeding back data into production systems. So yes, in that respect, Dataiku is doing a lot of ETL work. I would say one of the differences is that we are an analytical ETL rather than an operational ETL. And so we are not competing head-to-head with traditional operational ETL kind of software. But yes, we do a lot of ETL stuff. And there is definitely some overlap here. And again, some of our customers use us primarily as a very productive, data-oriented, analytical-oriented ETL.
So we got a question in our chat, and I want to ask it from you. So, and it's related to how it started, how you got started, and it sounds like it's a current user. So, the question is from a systems admin.
Oh, Jared froze.
Yeah.
From a system admin point of view,
software is.
Yeah, you froze for a second, Jared.
System. Oh, my bad. From a system admin's point of view, the software is very well behaved and system friendly. It runs as a non-root user and keeps all of the stuff well contained. Was that a goal or just good development design?
Yeah. So thanks for the nice comment. Indeed, so I would say a good development design is also a goal, of course. But yes, I think I don't think I know. It was a goal to be runnable easily. And yes, we believe that software should, in the vast majority of cases, run as a non-root and should run off a single folder, etc. So yes, it was both a goal and a good development design.
Got it.
I want to go back to the ETL question that Jared posed, because I think one of the difficulties and you talked about governance and sort of we talked about sort of multiple users coming into the platform. A big driver around data is the ability to do self-service. And so I think one of the big things that Dataiku differentiates itself in, and maybe talk a little bit about how it helps with self-service, but you can have what folks have referred to either as a citizen data scientist or a citizen analyst that can use the data science workbench in Dataiku to do things that don't require knowledge of ETL. It's again, it's not an operational question. It's more of an analytical question. How does the platform and the users that you've seen on the platform align with that self-service vision?
So we definitely agree here. This is one of the core founding goals, which is to enable many more people and to enable them to be autonomous. And that really ties in with this self-service vision. You can come in, connect to the data you have, to the data you are allowed to see, all in a secure fashion, of course, and start asking your questions, start doing stuff, start working on it. An example as I could give is that, of course, at Dataiku, we use Dataiku. And one of the biggest users of Dataiku is our chief revenue officer. So who comes in and builds forecast, demand, and lead generation kind of things himself without having to always ask for the analytical team, please build me this report. No, he connects. He has access to some reference datasets. The reference datasets that need deeper and more complex connection to all of our business systems have been built by a central team. But then asking a question, building the flow to answer this question, and getting the answer is doable by everybody in the organization. And yeah, that really shows this self-service approach.
That's an important litmus test, is when the company that builds the product has its own people using the product. I think that's a big and important thing, sir.
Definitely, we have a very big Dataiku instance at Dataiku.
That's great. If you think about the preparation of data, so sometimes some organizations, especially larger ones, you come in and they have some enterprise data assets. It might be a data lake, it might be a data mesh, it might be an enterprise data warehouse, it might be just something that's already been structured and prepared so that at least they've organized the data, curated the data, versus those who just have source systems and extracts from those systems and how they can sort of manage those. What are you seeing in the customer base? And obviously there's no such thing as ideal, but what's the preference for Dataiku? What recommendations do you give to organizations?
Honestly, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we've not seen a silver bullet on that. Organizational models is indeed a question that comes always. Very centralized, hub and spoke, big data warehouse versus one plus spokes, etc. We really see all of them. We believe that, so for example, some customers ask us, should I deploy one instance of Dataiku or multiple instances of Dataiku?
Yeah, that's another question.
Usually, of course, we will recommend rather to centralize, because the reuse, collaboration, sharing are some of our core values. There are, of course, some reasons for which people would want and do deploy a separate instance, and it's typically when there's data that you absolutely want to segregate. Of course, Dataiku does role-based access control, and within a single instance you can segregate. But typically, when you have HR data or things like that, you want to keep them physically separate, or personal data, or health data, etc.
That's great. If you look at the product roadmap, the things that you set out to accomplish in 2012 versus where you are today, how much of that paper napkin discussion, the whiteboard discussion that happened in the incubator has actually materialized? Has the team ever looked back and say, we planned on doing this and look at what we've done?
Actually, yes. Actually, we had a company offsite a bit more than 1 month ago, and we presented to all 1,000 employees. Indeed, it was not a napkin; it was just a sheet of paper where we had scribbled things together. And I would say the interesting part is that we were not so far off the mark, and we have accomplished a lot of what we wanted to do. Again, in terms of how wide we are, and we went further on some topics. One of the big topics we are currently investing in is really going. Okay, I have acquired my data. I have done all of my projects, including AutoML or not, including code or not, etc. I have produced data assets, data products. How then do I make it available and make it beneficial to many more people in the organization? So we are doing a large push towards serving the needs of what we call the data consumers more, and not just with dashboards, but with applications that are built, again, with or without code, but then that can be leveraged directly by end users. So we often take the example, of a customer where a data scientist has built a pricing optimization model or something like that, and suddenly his inbox is swamped by requests from individual store managers. Hey, could you please run the model on this data with these inputs, etc. And what we've created is the ability for this data scientist, even without code, to transform this model into an application that then the store managers can come in and run on their own without having to go through the data scientist and through manual work each time.
So if you think about that, the idea of publishing an endpoint for a model and then having that model be accessible is a big thing. So are you thinking of API level access or integration with low code? What types of things are you thinking about?
Oh, so making models available as API is actually something that we've done for quite a few years, and that is leveraged by a significant number of customers, where indeed models served by Dataiku are now fully embedded into business applications, into business processes, sometimes in live business processes. Things like risk scoring, fraud detection, pricing optimization are some of the things that come to mind. And indeed, we are currently looking a lot at low-code application development. This is a topic that has had ups and downs, but is having ups right now. And yeah, we see a lot of interest in making model predictions a building block of such low-code applications.
I think as the data science world matures, I think the other area is, and again, you mentioned AutoML, but the other area is maybe prepackaged analytical applications that folks can trust and buy and validate. But more of a building block model, more of a Lego block model, rather than starting always from scratch, is probably another important area we see customers in investing in. How do I not only share the data, but how do I share and trust the models that are out there?
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Jared fed the squirrels, and Jared is back.
Yeah, the squirrels are running the internet now again for me. So one of the questions that I do have for you is, how is it licensed? How do people buy this? Is it per user, or is it a whole enterprise thing, or is it just a mix?
So it's a mix. We do have it's a recurring license model with a core package access to the software priced based on with editions priced based on the features, and then per user price. So our model is really that we believe that the value is in the user and who uses Dataiku. And that's why we have chosen, for example, not to make something based on the compute power or things like that. Importantly, we believe that this kind of pricing aligns with the interest of the customer more.
Yeah. And so on your cloud version, so this is always an interesting challenge, because in the cloud you have compute costs that have to get built into things. How do you deal with that? Like, is it just that you offload all the compute costs to things like Snowflake and whatnot that have variability? How do you deal with that?
So we indeed work a lot. So one of the core values of Dataiku is indeed offloading compute to where the data is. And we have probably the most complete integration and push down with Snowflake of all machine learning and data science platforms out there. That being said, there are always some workloads that are not pushed down, and typically very imperative Python or R kind of things are not really pushable down. So yes, our cloud version has some compute. So our pricing model on that is that each time you buy a user, it does include a fairly generous amount of compute power. And then basically, if you need even more, we are mostly going to pass the costs onto you.
Got it. Yeah, that's always a challenge to kind of figure out when you're servicing an account.
Yes, how to put the needle. Of course, we use Dataiku to check on that.
So one of the things that we didn't really talk about is from $0 to $1. Getting that
Zero
across
customers,
that very first customer. What did that look like? Was it for some startups it's kind of a consulting effort and then it turns into a product? Like how did that work out for you guys?
So indeed we did some consulting at first, but it was so from the very first day we knew that we were going to build software, but we did choose indeed and we still do, but for the first 18-24 months we did significant amount of consulting for two reasons. First, it allowed us to bootstrap the software, to bootstrap the company. So we actually did not raise until more than 2 years after we had created the company, but also it confronted us to the reality of the problems of the customer. So we had quite a few cases where we were doing consulting on deploying Hadoop, managing stuff, etc. We did not yet have a software that could do it, but we were learning so much about, we must not forget these particular things that we would probably have missed if we did not have this consulting activity at first. And indeed, then we started these consulting customers pitching the product and let's now try to do it with Dataiku instead. It's interesting, actually. We had one of our first paying customers for the software insisted on, I have this project to do. First, I'm going to try to do, so it was a Hadoop, so it was doing some ETL with Hadoop, basically. First, I'm going to try to do it manually with just Hive and Pig, and then I'll try with your software. And they really did the exercise twice, and they bought just after because they had seen how incredibly faster it was.
That's great. Yeah, I love startups. I love that startup experience of using consulting as the ramp to. Do you still use it today? Do you still have a team that does consulting today that kind of acts as a feeder to the product development?
Not really. We still have services activity, but it's really more services of implementing the product and consulting around the product. We do not do services as a lead for the product anymore.
Okay.
So,
we lost Jared again.
Square again.
Yeah.
What's the
Jared, feed the squirrels. Come on.
I know. All right. So what's the best way to get the hands on the software? That's the question.
So just as we mentioned, we have both Dataiku hosted for you, or you just download it. So on Dataiku hosted for you, you can just go on our website and you have a free 15 days trial, no installation required, everything runs on our servers. Or you can download the free edition of Dataiku. So that Dataiku free edition is free to download and install and to keep forever. Okay.
And then, are there any questions that I have not asked that I should be asking about Dataiku? That people need to know about Dataiku.
That's an interesting question. I think we touched quite a lot of things. I think one of the interesting things that again maybe we did not envision when we started is the diversity of use cases. Again, we had thought at the very beginning mostly of what you can think traditionally when you hear data, big data. It's more digital marketing, customer journey, customer knowledge, recommendation, etc. But then we see a lot of use cases in other industries, notably in manufacturing, where we see a lot of things around maintenance, around centralizing and processing sensor information, about doing process optimization, including in very complex like a chemical industry. And again, there is nothing in Dataiku that knows anything about the chemical industry, but there are not many people at Dataiku who know anything about it, but there is a lot that can be done with Dataiku. So
there's a question that came in online. I don't know if you can talk about this, but what is coming in the next release?
So indeed, we will be announcing our next release next month at our Everyday AI conference that happens both in New York, London, and Bengaluru. So you are free to register and join these conferences. We are announcing a few things that are really interesting, notably for coders, to give them even more freedom and even more power, and to make them feel even more at home when working with Dataiku, just as if they were running in their traditional ID. So that's one of the big things we will be introducing in the next release. But again, we will be saying more next month at Everyday AI.
Yeah, the answers to that are always a little bit. We have to keep a little bit out. We can't put it all in.
Yeah, it is a little bit, of course.
So how do they find data? How do people find Dataiku? What's the, how do they, is it dataiku.com? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Dataiku.com. And is there a demo that they can download?
Yes. So you just click on the big Get Started button, and you can just in a couple of clicks get your own Dataiku Online instance. There are some demo projects that you can load, highlighting different capabilities, and of course you can plug your own data and get started processing with Dataiku and getting insights from your data.
That is excellent. Well, Clément, it was a real pleasure to speak with you. Sorry, my my internet is from the 1990s today, but
pleasure was shared. So thanks a lot for having me. It was really great.
Awesome.
Thanks very, very much.
And thank you, Arcady.
Thank you.
Have a good Friday. We'll catch you all later.